me that notwithstanding we get the same report every time, that members of council are very keen to get these audited, particularly where trees are involved. And we had a workshop not that long ago, which I thought was pretty clear the consensus was we need to continue to audit land management agreements surrounding trees. And I accept that perhaps there are some land management agreements where it was you'll build a house a certain height, that obviously it's not going to change very often because the height of the building is done, and okay, I'll concede that perhaps doesn't need to be audited too frequently. But I think trees do need to be audited, and they seem to be the ones we get most annoyed about when people have cut down trees contrary to the land management agreement, and because we're not checking up on them, it's too late to do anything about it. And in terms of the amount of effort, let's be clear. The Burnside urban forest that's on land the council owns, there's 40,000 trees. And those trees are being inspected on a cycle of, I think, depending on risk level of the trees, at least once every 4 years. For the least risk tree. So I simply refuse to believe that it's a terribly onerous requirement to add 110 private trees to the interactive tree record and then have people, as they're going out and checking our 40,000 trees, at the same time when they're in the area, go and have a look at the private tree that's covered by a land management agreement and check that it's still there and the LMA is being complied with. I cannot believe that this is some onerous, vastly costly thing to do. Words fail me. How anybody can say this is difficult to do. So, look, I'd like to propose that we do that.
Councillor Davey, do you wish to speak now? In seconding?
No, I'll wait till, I'll second it, but I'll wait to hear any debate. Thank you.
Councillor Dawes?
Yes, I'd just like to support Councillor Jones, and I do remember that workshop, and I do remember us talking about the LMAs which involve trees, which are 110 of them. There are 900 in total. And what I like in particular is paragraph 22 of our report before us, which says that we could undertake this as a staff within 3 to 5 years and likely, I love the word likely, in existing resources. So I don't know, I hope there's not going to be a budget bid for this, because I think it can occur, and it is in line with what the workshop was saying, and I can't remember, Councillor Jones, how long that was ago that was. So I will be in favour. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Through the Mayor, question for the administration. I'd like to understand the problem with this, the tree situation. Is the problem that when a property has a development application for development, that they don't list this tree and the tree is at risk? So doesn't the development approval process protect the tree anyway? Or what is a problem to do with poisoning, and what's the likelihood of those type of problems?
Through Madam Mayor, the LMAs were used traditionally in the past to protect items such as trees and protect certain things that were gaps in the development plan. They're not used now because we have the Infrastructure Act to basically provide those protections. In summary, the trees that we're talking about now will have been considered worthy of protection by an LMA at the time, and that would have been considering future development that might have occurred on the site, or in some instances the neighbour's site could have impacted a tree. Those trees are, of course, if they're significant, they are protected by current legislation. So the LMAs are really redundant as far as that's concerned. And if you recall, during the workshop, Gavin Layden did use a particular example where we found one of the LMAs was not adhered to and a tree had been removed. There was that, excuse me, thank you.
Disturbing.
There was actually an incident where the tree wasn't where the LMA said it should have been. It was actually on a neighbouring property. And in that instance, the remedy to council would have been, because we were in 3 years and we could prove that we could take civil action against it. But the best we could hope for was a replacement tree. And that would cost us significant dollars to get to that stage going through the court process. So the understanding I had from Gavin Layton's presentation was that we really should not be auditing the LMAs. No other council does it this way, and that includes trees.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkin.
Thank you, Worship. A question through you to the staff. Were the 3 Moreton Bay fig trees at 269 Glenburn Road, were they on an LMA anywhere? Would they have been protected before they were, shall we say, removed? Thank you.
Through Madam Mayor, I'll probably just need to check with Mr Heinrich, but I don't recall that they were subject to LMAs. They were considered as a development application, and it was legitimate that they should be removed in terms of their proximity to other buildings. That's correct. Yep.
Councillor
A question for the administration through the Mayor. I'm not sure where this fits, but in regard to linear parks or creek lines or open space that is ours, is owned by council, but has neighbours that bordering it and running into it, do the LMAs cover those sorts of situations? Because I can remember a while ago that where we actually were asking a resident to move part of their, I can't remember if it was a shed or whatever, or a veranda that had, and we wanted them to, they were going to have to install a fence, or council was installing a fence. So it's a long-winded way of asking, do these land management agreements cover those situations as well?
Through Madam Mayor, no, not specifically. LMAs are generally agreements that are agreed by 2 parties. So I don't recall any LMA specifically that we have for trees or any other assets on council-owned property. This will generally be between two different parties.
One more, just...
yes, that's fine.
Would it cover, though, sharing of where a front garden actually runs into a reserve? Would we have a land management agreement for that development that protects the reserve? For instance, people starting to move out onto our reserve space, cooking barbecues and things like that, and installing outdoor furniture on council's reserve.
Through Madam Mayor, no, the LMA would not be required in that instance. The council reserve is obviously council property, and if there was any encroachment of furniture or assets onto that land, then the encroachment process would deal with that. You don't need an LMA in place to control what we have as our land, even if private land abuts onto that.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Davey, you ready to speak?
Thank you,
now?
Mayor. I endorse the comments that have already been made, particularly by Councillor Jones and Councillor Dawes. This relates to 110 agreements, and I think there's certainly historic agreements entered into with agreement of the parties originally, and they're there for the management and preservation of the trees and the land that is on them. So I think as we go about our normal business, I think it's quite reasonable for us to be able to check and keep an eye on the ones that are there. And so it doesn't involve any extra costs. I would like to see this continued, so I hope people will support these agreements. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Cornish.
Just a question, if I could, regarding the actual audits. is it driving past, trees there, yes, it's okay. Is it us going onto their property without their knowledge, checking the health and viability of the tree and assessing it? Like, how far do we actually go with these audits? Yeah, I'm just sort of covering that question off.
Through Madam Mayor, clearly there are 110 different cases out there, and they're not all going to be in the front yard. Some of them might be at the back of the premises. Some of them we may need access, agreed access through the owners. So it's not just a drive-by.
No.
Some of them may be, but others probably aren't. So we do need that access. We were also,
although you would imagine if it's an LMA, it's going to be a significant tree, right? It's
yes.
not going to be a small little shrub that you wouldn't be able to see behind a house.
You're not necessarily going
Sorry,
to be able
I know
to
I'm not asking questions. Sorry.
determine all of that from the
Yeah.
front. So it's not as simple as a drive-by. You've then got to look at burden of proof, whether you can actually prove whether the tree's gone or not. So if you drive by and you notice a tree's gone, what then? Well, when was it removed? What are you going to do about that? What do you want to affect, in terms of an outcome? If you're only auditing once every 5 years, 5 years isn't frequently enough. You have to be within that 3-year time frame for you to be able to take action against it. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to speak or ask questions? If not...
Sorry, another question.
Yes?
If we are to do it in a 3-year period, it's going to cost us some money, I presume.
Through the Madam Mayor, the report says if it's within a 5-year, we could probably take that on board, but I haven't got the information at this evening. If we do it within 3 years, there will be an impact, and that will be included in the draft budget for consideration.
Yeah, like number 2 actually.
Like number 10 asked for.
Yeah.
Correct, that's it.
Brilliant, thanks. Well, I will speak. I will support the motion. I actually do think it's important for us to do. I do want to see it every 3 years so that we can actually take some action rather than every 5 years, even if it does cost this council some money. I do think it's something that the residents of the City of Burnside would want us to do. So I will be supporting this amended motion.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? If there's no one on the screen, so I'm going to go back to Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I accept that some of these trees may be protected by legislation, but some of them may not be, and we don't know because we haven't audited them. So if there is greater protection than legislation, what's not to like, it seems to me, that we're protecting additional trees that legislation may not protect. And let's not forget that legislation can change. It wasn't that long ago that the state government vastly increased the circumference of trees that were protected, and it's only very recently, like within the last year, that they've changed the rules back. But who's to say that a future government might say, oh, these rules are putting encumbrances on development. We know the Property Council of South Australia went bananas when the government reduced the circumference, saying it was just Adelaide being backwards. So who's to say a future government won't reverse those protections? But the fact is, if we've got a land management agreement on the tree, it is protected, regardless of what the state government does. So, look, I hope you'll support the motion.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? Motion is carried. Now we move to item number 11.3, page 63. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mayor. I move in accordance with the recommendation that Council notes the 2024 Environmental Sustainability Review. I thank the administration for what the Mayor's already has said is a significant body of work, pulling together all of the work that we're doing to make sure that we are environmentally sustainable and that we can build on this. It's very significant and quite a broad range of work. I just have a couple of queries. I'm really interested in our carbon offsets and how we can actually increase those in the City of Burnside. I mean, we're doing a whole lot in terms of our new electric heater for the pool, which was eating up a lot of, it was just environmentally undesirable. But I'd be very keen to know how we can, and while we buy trees to offset our carbon we bought some, I think, in Kapunda. I'd really like to know how we can increase our plantings and work to actually do that on Burnside land wherever possible. Thanks. I hope you'll support this.
So that's a question you would like answered tonight? I'll refer that to you.
Through Madam Mayor, can I direct that to Dr. Ropeman? Thank you.
Through the Mayor, thank you for the positive comments about the report. Carbon offsets is an interesting question. In the report, it was noted that we should review that program before doing any more planting, which we'll do early next year. Typically, an organisation will do carbon offsetting last as the last measure before becoming carbon neutral, because it costs money normally to do that. We've set up this innovative program where the funding comes from the pool and the Regal theatre users, so it's not coming out of council's general revenue or rates. So I would recommend that no more funding is put towards carbon offsetting at this stage. Any additional funding should be put towards reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And then once there are no more options for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and we want to hit carbon neutral by 2030, that's when any further decisions about offsets should be made.
Councillor Hubel, seconding?
Yeah, just hoping to second. Thank you, Worship.
You don't wish to speak now?
I'll defer.
All right, Councillor Hallett.
Two questions, please, through the Mayor to the administration. Is it possible to do a comparison with other similar sized councils in regard to, I'm looking at page 76 and where it talks about the number of street trees, other tree planting, other planting. Can we look at doing a comparison with other councils to see how we progress against them? I know we know how we're going overall with the tree canopy, but I think it would be helpful to be able to make a comparison. And then I've got one more question.
Through the Mayor, again, I'll pass over to Dr. Ropeman.
Through the Mayor, that's an interesting question. Thank you. I think it would be possible to do a comparison with the planting of other councils and supply that to council early next year.
I'll allow you to have your second question, Councillor Hallett.
One more, thank you. And then on page 69, under the dot point water-wise, council installed 34 new verge soakers. My question is, how could we increase this? What's needed? A budget bid? That's the question.
Through Madam Mayor, Dr. Ropeman, thank you.
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question again. Yes, if additional water-sensitive urban design measures are desired, then that would require some thought into the best way to do that, and then to have a look at the budget required for that. So there's a bit of work involved in working out how to get the best bang for the buck and how best to do that, and then what it would cost.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Turnbull.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I have a question. Page 77, tree removals by the year. There's a big difference between 23 and 24. 330 and 23, 630. I just wondered why this large disparity.
Through Madam Mayor, Dr. Ropeman. Thanks.
Through the Mayor, I'm glad you noticed that large disparity, and we certainly thought the same when we saw it. It does look like an anomaly. The Urban Forest team did go out specifically looking for dead and unhealthy trees last year to remove them, had a specific project to do as many as they could in the year, and so that number went right up. So far this financial year, we've removed 190 trees. It's impossible to predict how many reactive removals we might have to do in the remainder of the financial year, but it is looking like we'll be much closer to what we saw in previous years this financial year. So that last year was just an anomaly.
I have a second question, I'm afraid. On the other page, 76, there's always a lot of good statistics about what we plant in terms of shrubs, wildflowers, grasses, trees, etc. But there's never any statistics about how many of these survive. And when you live in Stonyfield with horrible soil, there are lots of dead trees every day and dead shrubs. Every time you go out, you see them. So I'd like to have some statistics about what dies. What's the percentage that we get to survive?
Through the Mayor, I suppose that information is provided in two ways. Firstly, the tree removal numbers that are in the report, but secondly, on the Urban Forest Interactive website, there is a success rate of plantings that's updated automatically for the last year at all times, and that is something I can point you to via email if you like.
Right, Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a question, first of all, question. We all received a digital 15-minute summary of the sustainability report, which I thought was excellent. And I would like visual instead of reading lots of pages, but you did it well, Dr. Phil. My question is, can it be accessed by residents via our website?
Through the Mayor, that version was specifically put together for councillors. In the past, we have done a Burnside Neutral episode that's done a bit of a wrap-up for the year, and we could certainly look at doing something like that. I think the language would be just a little different for the community. Won't mention budget bids and things like that, but certainly we can put something together for the community, and we have in the past.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Question through the Mayor for the administration. Thank you for the detailed report, and my question is, does Council have sufficient policy in place to expand the scope of what we consider as carbon emission activities? For example, do our policies enable carbon emission activities like traffic calming devices, which do generate significant pollutants, in particular certain types of speed humps in our city? Sorry about that expanded question, but essentially, can such traffic calming devices be included in the scope of adding up the emissions in the city?
Through the Mayor, I think we're doing two bits of work that are related to that. The first one is that we're going through a procurement process at the moment for a community renewables scheme, so helping the community reduce their emissions. And we're also looking at our EV fleet. In the future, we could look at doing something about the community's EV fleet. The second part of our work is expanding our emissions inventory over the next few years to look at Scope 3 emissions, and those are all the emissions involved in things that the council procures. Those things that I've mentioned would all involve large volumes of emissions, and so they would be, I think, the first place to focus our work. Things like emissions from having cars slow down over speed humps would be much lower in their volume, and so therefore I wouldn't suggest that should be a focus in the first instance.
Thank you.
Councillor Dave, you have a question?
Thank you. I just have another question, because it's fascinating reading once you drill down into it. It's about on page 106 of our papers, and it's table 12, waste and resources. I'm very interested in compostable bags that we provide free to residents, and now that we get so much, we've buy these now at point of purchase when we buy our fruit and veg and everything else. Is there an opportunity for us to reduce our provision of these bags or stop them altogether? Thank you.
Through the Mayor, yes, the number of compostable bags that we are providing to residents is reducing, and actually, as that is reducing naturally over time, it is saving council money because they are more readily available through supermarkets and people are buying their own, and people put stuff in compost bins without compostable bags. I would suggest that it's wise for council, with its push on getting more food into green bins, it's wise for council to continue providing that service, because some residents do really appreciate and want to use the bags. A recent audit that was conducted as part of our Green Organics weekly trial showed a big increase in bags used as part of that trial, where we've seen a big increase in diversion rates from landfills. So I think they are playing their part, and it would be unwise if council wants to continue improving landfill diversion to take away that service, especially when it is naturally declining and costing council less.
I think an additional comment on that not all supermarkets, they all do provide the bags, but there's still so much fruit and veg pre-packaged that doesn't have people actually taking a bag to fill up their groceries. So that, until that disappears, one would like to think hopefully it does, then I agree with your commentary. Councillor Davey, you have another question?
Yes, I just have a follow-up question in terms of, it's fascinating to read the bin repair requests and how they seem to be increasing. And I just wondered if there's a trend or...
You got a page reference?
Sorry, this is again on table 12, page 106, and it's under the section of just the additional waste statistics, and bins replaced due to irreparable damage, bin repair requests, and bins stolen or misplaced. And I just wondered that they seem to be increasing, especially the destruction of them. I just wondered why. Do we have any indicators of that, and what that must be costing us?
Through the Mayor, yeah, there was a big increase in bins that needed repairs and bins that were lost or stolen this year. As it's only 1 year of a big increase, we don't know whether that's a trend yet, so it'll be really interesting to have this discussion in a year once we've got another year of data, or another 6 months. I can't give you numbers on costs associated with that, although just off the top of my head I don't remember seeing a large blip in the waste budget, so I wouldn't be overly concerned about that, but I can look further into it. We may expect that as the bin fleet gets older, they were rolled out about 10 years ago now, the 3-bin system, that those things may start to increase as the bin fleet gets older. But as I said at the start, it's only 1 year of an increase so far, so it's too early to say that's happening. Let's have a good discussion about that, would be my suggestion, when the next report comes out, and see if a trend has developed.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. Just like to congratulate on the report, and also congratulate on the heaters at the pool. I've had feedback from members of the public that use it regularly, someone I work with, and they were quite concerned that it was not going to heat the pool as well as the previous gas heaters, but it clearly does. In fact, they say it heats it better. So I just wanted to congratulate everyone on that project and reducing our carbon emission.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Or Councillor Hubel?
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, look, very, very glad that this has been withdrawn for discussion. It's always good when such good work is interrogated and questioned, and in my case, certainly acknowledged. I do agree with that point of Dr. Fields about, agreeing that emission reduction is a preferable primary course of action over offsets. And I guess it goes back to, if we look at, the types of climate action we can be taking, we've got mitigation and adaptation. And I think changing our practices is better than, fixing the problem that's been created. So that's a good proactive thing. I like that idea of the scorecards against others from Councillor Hallett. Maybe we can flex our status a little bit with others. And the compostable bags, that's an interesting thing, because obviously we've got, fruit and veg in compostable bags, but, there's commercial products that are that are becoming, better quality and more available, that are a higher quality, caddy liner. I know I certainly prefer to buy my own. I like they're a little bit taller, a particular product I like. So I think when you see a free market economy catching up and adapting to a movement, something's going right. So thank you, everyone, for their work on this report, as always, and I commend it to you all.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? If not, I just want to say thank you. It's an enormous amount of work by an enormous number of staff, and I do want to congratulate everyone in the team for not only putting the report together, but all the actions that have led towards this report. So now I'll hand over to Councillor Davey. All right, then I can put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Motion's carried. Next is Councillor Harvey, 11.5, 11.5, page 121.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the recommendation that Council notes the signage guidelines, and I want to also acknowledge the fantastic efforts of administration for their assistance in putting this policy, which is very comprehensive, together in a short time. This policy provides clear and consistent criteria for both council and tenants to follow, something that has been needed, ensuring signage aligns with broader communities' objectives whilst enhancing the visual appeal of open spaces and supports the effective management of council properties. The guidelines will also streamline the process for handling signage requests. As we know, some 45 plus odd signs have been removed from Kensington Gardens Reserve and 11 removed from Penfold Park. This is a great result, and believe me, the residents are so pleased with this. The signage guidelines will also inform the review of Council's open space policy in early 2025 and the leasing of community facilities policy. The number of signs in council open spaces will be minimised, with messaging consolidated where possible. Temporary signs will be removed when no longer required. Styles of standard signs will be consistent where possible. Relevant approvals must be obtained in limited situations in line with the Planning and Design Code, in particular in some heritage areas or for signs of a certain size. This is a well-planned and executed signage policy. Thank you, administration. Well done, bravo. I hope you will support this. Thank you.
Councillor Hallett, you're seconding?
No, I've got a question.
I'd like a seconder first. Councillor Turnbull, you're seconding? And you'll reserve your right to speak till later. Now I'll go back to you, Councillor Hallett, for your question.
Yeah, thank you. In regard to the guidelines attachment, on page 127, under non-council advertising, I just was confused in regard to whether we're talking about signs within the premises, but then later on, when it talks about advertising and sponsorship signs, it seems to be talking about signs that might be on a fence or external to a lease premise. So I'm just asking for clarification around whether we are talking about that signage has to be within a lease premises, or can it be external to a lease premise?
Thank you for the question. Through Madam Mayor, I'll pass over to Mr. Schroeder. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, yes. Basically, the guidelines will cover signage that applies both internal and external to council lease facilities, and our leases actually set the rules as to what occupiers of those buildings can actually do under their lease.
Councillor Dawes?
Just to follow up to what Councillor Hallett was saying, In particular, page 122, paragraph number 11, it might be 123, it talks about third-party advertising signage. Now that, to me, could also mean sponsorship. And I have seen so many times throughout Burnside that the sign is facing towards the reserve. And I won't name any clubs because I think it happens throughout the Burnside Council. Can the acting CEO advise whether we do check this out regularly, because it may only happen on match days, which are Saturdays, where we haven't got, we've got ranges, but I'm just a query because it's quite clearly stated they must be facing inwards towards the club area, whether it be on the veranda or wherever. Could you add some detail, please?
Certainly through Madam Mayor. It's probably a combination of the two. We would certainly respond to any complaints or reported concerns about adverts, but as well, you're aware that our rangers are out and about around the reserves and parks anyway. So yes, they would be keeping an eye on those things as well. So it's probably a combination of the two. When they're out in the parks, they're generally doing other things, not just specifically looking for issues with signs. So it's usually done as a secondary check.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Yes, just following on from those questions, I'm particularly interested in the visual pollution that can result from some signage, especially excessive use in our parks and the third party. And I just wanted to compliment the Beaumont Tennis Club, which is the the club that has the best management of their sponsorship and advertising and promotion in the way they manage it in their club rooms and in their facilities. It really is exemplary, and I would hope that we all use that as it's a bit of a benchmark for the rest of the community, because some of the clubs have got a bit, I don't know if we just haven't policed it or what, but it has got a little bit out of control in recent times where it just becomes, it destroys the park when there's just this horrible signage that just shouldn't be there, really. And it's unnecessary and it's counterproductive, I think, to the clubs that do that. I also think that council has a responsibility to not overdo signage. I actually don't like our banner signage that we put out and about. I think we've got enough electronic means of providing messages to our community, and I'd like to see us keep signage to an absolute minimum on our buildings and the depot wall and around and about. I just don't think it does us any favours to have signage out and about on our buildings. But so thank you very much for these guidelines. I hope they'll streamline the whole process and make it all much more manageable for everybody.
Councillor Henge.
Oh, thank you, Madam Mayor. A question for the administration. Just double checking, is there a grandfathering clause through this? So existing signs that may not comply with our new policy have to be addressed by the clubs? Thank you.
Through Madam Mayor, I'll refer that through to Mr. Schroeder. Thank you.
Through the Mayor, thank you for the question. Basically, there will be existing agreements and leases in place that will allow those signs, but when those leases run their course, then we'll have that opportunity to review them within the context of the new guidelines.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkin.
Yes, I'd just like to remind people that signs are important. Actually, the design of the sign should be not large but smaller than larger, and it should be eye-catching. And particularly in the supporting community clubs, signage is important because it is advertising, shall I say, other businesses that actually contribute to that club and financially support that club to actually stay in place and use the facilities that are available. And they are responsibly using the facilities that are available to us. So when you come to improve the facilities, you do need to have some finances, and the more the clubs are being asked to contribute to those finances to bring things up to speed, the greater and more succinct the signage has to be, I think, rather than larger and bolder. My comment.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Otherwise, I shall go back to Councillor Harvey.
Thank you.
Councillor Cornish just got it.
I just wonder a question in terms of how this set of guidelines will interact with our bylaw. Obviously, the bylaw is effectively, well, that's legally a more important document. So we will be adhering to the bylaw before these guidelines. I just need to clarify that.
Through Madam Mayor, yes, that's correct. The bylaws will take precedent over that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. Thank you all for your input. As Councillor Davey mentioned, Beaumont Bowls Club is an excellent example of advertising, with their advertising facing inwards that you cannot even see from the road. So it is not visible from the road, plus they have advertising inside the club, which also is brilliant, and they tell me that it has worked extremely well. So hopefully that sets a precedence with all other clubs following with these guidelines. So I hope you will support this. Thank you.
Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Councillor Harvey, you have the next one as well. That is on page 128, Coach Road Sky.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the officer's recommendation of receiving and noting section 270 review, the final report of Coach Road Sky, and takes no further action at this time, as the discussions of council are lawful and the decisions made are the preferred decisions. Once again, I want to thank administration for the months of work that have gone into the upgrades of traffic calming and lighting along Coach Road and Sky to keep our community safe. In particular, James Brennan, who has gone above and beyond in responding to residents of Sky. 54% of these residents supported the lighting, as indicated on the lighting design map. 71% of residents supported the installation of lighting at intersections. This is a safety issue and has been ongoing, I believe, for many years, as are the installations of traffic calming to address areas of speeding. Council provide up to 16 local native trees or shrubs to help screen lighting for private properties, which is available to residents for their planting. There have been street tree plantings also by Council. Council will install a visor at the intersection to minimise disruption to native fauna and birds. Whilst rubbish dumping does occur at the Sky Lookout, Council are doing what they can to mitigate this issue. I can report, after attending the Sky Lookout on many occasions, I have bumped into council workers picking up the rubbish. On many occasions, I have been there when there is no rubbish. So I can report that council are indeed definitely onto this and responding to residents. Thank you, administration, for all these continued efforts on keeping residents of Sky safer and the environment cleaner. Please support this motion. Thank you.
I seek a seconder. Councillor Cornish.
Reserve my right, thank you.
Right. Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Dawes.
Yes, it was a long report and I read it all. The only thing that the lawyers said was perhaps we should have been there permanently. Can I just go to the acting CEO and indicate what is the view of the administration? Is it needed?
Thank you. Through Madam Mayor, the view of the administration is that we would absolutely not put a bin up there, and simply because of the fire risk around having a bin up there. So as Councillor Harvey referred to, we are on top of the rubbish situation. a bin is not necessary and it adds risk that we do not need. So that is our response. Thank you.
Can I reinforce that in that about 8 years ago, bin was placed at the top of Mount Osmond. Within a week, it was set fire to during fire ban season, and so the bin was removed immediately, and we've never had one back there since. And certainly, Mount Osmond residents do not want that risk, and I'm sure the Skye residents, in the main, feel exactly the same way. Councillor Hetchke.
Oh, thank you. Just speaking to the motion to say that this has been a very long situation for the community, and just wanted to also acknowledge Councillor Piggott in the last term of council for his notice, motion on notice about the dangerous driving and illegal rubbish dumping that happened on this road, and his work to drive the need for street lighting or any other traffic calming initiatives. And it's taken a little while, and as Councillor Harvey has pointed out, it's now resolved. So thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? If not, I shall go back to Councillor Harvey.
Thank you everyone for your input. I'll just put it to the vote. Thank you.
Right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Now we move to item 11.7, page 293. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Matt. Look, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, but I would like to draw your attention to page 299, which is the ratios that the Audit Committee is advising that Council should prepare its budget and long-term plan on. And I don't know if you're familiar with the writings of David Hume, the Scottish philosopher, but he famously suggested that you cannot derive an ought from an is. And these ratios have come about because we've prepared a long-term financial plan, and it spits out some numbers and it spits out these ratios. And then we've said, because the model spits out these ratios, that's how we should prepare the long-term plan. And it's a back-to-front way of thinking, in my opinion. And I said, what I'd like you to think about, and you don't have to answer it tonight, but you know, the budget process is kicking off, as we know, with budget bids open. If a resident said to you, Harvey, why have you said council needs to have an operating surplus ratio of between 3 and 6%? And I think I might scratch my head and say, I've got no idea. And I'm an accountant, so I don't know how you guys would go. Because an operating surplus ratio of 3 to 6% is about between 2 and 4 million. And someone might ask you, why do you need a surplus between 2 and 4 million? And I just ask you to consider whether you could answer a resident who asked you the question. And similarly, the net financial liabilities ratio of between 0% and 60%. And what that if in practice means, it says we should have a debt level somewhere between nil and $40 million. And if a resident asked you, how do you come up with that range of between nil and $40 million, Harvey? I think I might struggle to answer. Now, there are underlying assumptions that are spitting these numbers out, but these ratios of themselves, to my mind, are meaningless. And the reason you're getting that figure is because you say, we want to spend a certain amount of money on new things every year and pay it back over a certain period. And we're going to effectively put a cap on how much new spending we're going to do. But that is what's driving the plan, not these ratios. So I think we need to explicitly state why we need an operating surplus, why there's a limit to how much we're going to borrow, why don't we perpetually keep a level of borrowing? Why do we need to repay it back? These are things that we need to spell out, that you could actually explain to a resident rather than spitting out some meaningless ratios. So anyway, have a think about that, but I'd like to move the motion anyway.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Jennings, do you wish to speak now?
I'll reserve my right.
Right. Councillor Cornish. Councillor Dawes.
Yes, I did notice on page 299 under 9.4, and it's the first time I think I've seen it from the Audit Committee, where they looked at one particular expense item and said it was exceedingly high, which was the CEO advertisement. And I just found it strange that that was made in the minutes. So I'm just looking for, I'm going to the acting CEO, like, why was that included in the minutes? Because I don't know if they know what is an appropriate expense for advertising the position of CEO.
Through the Madam Mayor, the only thing I can say in response to that was it was a comment from the Audit and Risk Chair at the meeting when the Q1 budget variations were reviewed, and I can only assume it was in her experience of working with other councils. I guess she had an opinion that it was rather a large bill or cost for council to wear. So that's really all I can say. Perhaps she considered that a national search wasn't required, or the way that we went about it, but it was only a brief discussion on the night.
Yeah, I take that as a good point as well. We pondered over that for a very long time. Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A question for the administration. I'm referencing the local government inquiry final report in 2019, and one of the recommendations was that we produce our long-term financial plan according to the standardised set of models that they provide. Has that come forward? The standardised set of model long-term financial plans and infrastructure and asset management plans to support our statutory obligations? Thank you.
Through Madam Mayor, I believe we are producing our long-term financial plan and our financial statements in line with all of the financial standards and financial statements that are agreed. So they're standard statements across the whole of local government, and they, from time to time, do get updated. I don't know whether Mr. Birch has anything else to add to that. No. So as far as we're aware, we're doing everything we should be doing on this front. So we are using the model. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Councillor Hallett.
Two questions. On page 300, there's the motion moved by Alan Rushbrook and seconded by Councillor Davey. At point 3, it says operating deficit, an increase of $204,881. And just above the motion, there's a comment that overall council is increasing the operating deficit and currently borrowing for operations, which is not recommended practice. My comment or question is, does the Audit and Risk Committee have an idea or have a plan, or are they going to make recommendations about what we can do about this?
Through
They
Madam
pointed
Mayor.
it out. Are they going to come up with ways we could address it?
Through Madam Mayor, I believe that conversation and those recommendations were already provided, and that was incorporated into the recommendations for the 14% increase. So that reset of the budget, which we've subsequently agreed to do over a couple of years. So all this is basically saying is, whilst you're making a loss, it's not sustainable to continue in that position, and you are in fact using borrowings to pay for operations. We do not have enough revenue to pay for the costs of our operations at the moment. So with the second increase over and above CPI that was recommended by the Audit Committee, that would address our our deficit position, which effectively takes us to where we need to be. And on top of that, we've got our own actions in place to look at the costs of our services, etc.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, I get it. In regard to, it's related to the 14% spread over 3 years. I would be interested in what our own solutions, if you like, on top of that might be. But the second part of my question is, on the same page, down the bottom at 1, notes that by virtue of council resolution, council's in breach of the council's treasury management policy. Could that be explained, please?
Certainly through Madam Mayor. I might hand that over to Mr Birch. He can take you through that one. Thank you.
Through Madam Mayor, at present Council's Treasury Management Policy talks about having a minimum 30% as fixed borrowings and a minimum 30% as variable borrowings, with some flexibility in between for our portfolio. At the moment, Council's portfolio is sitting at about 18% on fixed interest, and so the Audit Committee have raised the fact that we are outside our policy. When Council considered the new borrowing back in June, as part of the resolution, you did note the fact that we would be outside of our policy with that new loan that we drew down in June. However, the Audit Committee have made a recommendation that we address that and borrow move the sum of about $3 million from our current variable portfolio into a fixed loan. And so that's a conversation we're having with the LGFA at the moment, getting some quotes, etc., in order to bring a report back to you to make that adjustment.
Thank you.
So anyone else wishes to speak or ask any questions? If not, I will... Have we had a seconder? Did you speak? I just wanted to check. Councillor Jennings. All right, so I will now go back to Councillor Jones.
Nothing to say.
All right, I shall put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Motion's carried. Now we move to Finance Report, 11.8, page 302, Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mayor. I move in accordance with the recommendation that Council receives the Finance End of Month Report for November 2024. And I don't have any comments on it other than thank you for the detailed clarification. But I did have a question about operating projects on page 308, and it relates to the McGill Road BPAC, where year-to-date expenditure has been $432,000. I just wondered where we're at with that and when it will be completed, and what the expenditure's been in this financial year, because I thought it was fairly close to being finalised. Thank you.
Through Madam Mayor, I'll pass that over to Mr Birch. Thank you.
Through Madam Mayor, the project as noted there is about 91% complete of the actual dollars amount. We're just receiving last final invoices. I believe that project is actually finished. However, the project managers aren't here with us this evening, so we may have to take that on notice if you require any further detail.
Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Worship. Happy to second.
Second, thank you.
And also, just I do want to make a comment on at point 13, page 303, just the cumulative rates impact of council decisions that we've been making. As part of our setting our last budget, we had an option to increase rates a bit or a bit more. We went for a bit, and part of that was really keeping an eye on our spending. And I guess what we've got, outlined here in this end-of-month report is a 0.4% rate increase is required now from what we were planning to do next year. So the 25-26 budget, which we had decided on at the last budget cycle, we're already pushing that up. So we have to tighten our belts. You know, rather than trying to go in the opposite direction, we're still, oh, a bit of money for this, a bit of money for that. We do not have a little bit of money. Our budget is in trouble. It's being looked after, it's being managed, but it is tight. And I just would implore everybody, with the budget bids opening up and us looking at 25, 26, keep your pet projects down. We need to tighten our belts. We owe it to the community to get this under control. So while it's 0.4%, sooner or later that'll add up. This month a bit, this month a bit. When we're making decisions that involve money, we need to think to ourselves, if this involves spending something extra, we need to really reconsider.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Henschke.
Question for the administration. Are we anticipating deferring any CapEx and OpEx? Because we're looking at, with halfway through the year, and 30%, I think, was the percentage of getting through it all.
Madam Mayor, no, not at this stage. Generally, as most councils, you have a bit of a hockey stick effect on our capital and our operating expenses. We'll closely look at that though during the half-year budget review, and we will come back if there is any scope for us not achieving those and let you know.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? If not, I shall go back to Councillor Davey. I'll move the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Now we move to Acting Chief Executive Officer's report. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mayor. I move in accordance with the recommendation that Council receives and notes the Acting CEO report for November 2024, and I thank him for all of the detail. I just have a question, which I'm receiving from my constituents about the status of the Regal Theatre Master Plan. There's a lot of interest in that, and when this is, my question is, through you to the administration, when will this be likely to be available to the community? Thanks.
Through Madam Mayor, unfortunately, Mr. Schroeder, who would have been ideal to answer that question, has left us. What I am aware of is the fact that following our engineering advice, we've gone back out and sought further information in terms of costing and a redesign for that, and I believe we've got that information now. So I would anticipate, and as there's no one else here to correct me, that we will be coming back to Council early in the new year to provide that information to you.
Any further questions, Councillor Davey? I need a seconder. Councillor Zing.
Happy to second, Mayor.
Do you have any questions? All right. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? If there's no one who wishes to speak, then I shall go back to Councillor Davey. All right. I shall move the motion. All those in favour of the Acting Chief Executive Officer's report? Those against? Motion's carried. Oh, sorry, I didn't have my microphone on. Subject to the leave of the meeting, the first one is that came in was from Councillor Hallett, re Romulo House, and you have a copy of that motion on your desks. I need someone to propose. Councillor Wilkins, you propose that we
I would like
accept this?
to indicate that I think I might have a conflict of interest as Deputy Camp
Yes,
Member.
yes, and I think you do, Councillor Jones, as well.
So I will
So
vacate.
you're both Councillor Jones, Councillor Wilkins are declaring a conflict of interest because they are both on the CAP or deputy for the CAP. That would be determining an outcome of this, so they are leaving the room. Of course, they didn't really need to move. I guess they didn't need to leave until we'd actually voted that we would agree to go ahead with it. But I do need a mover to support that we do accept this tonight. So, Councillor Cornish, you happy to move that? And a seconder, Councillor Hallett. All right, those in favour of us looking at this document? Right. Sorry, seek leave. Thank you. All right, so Councillor Hallett, off you go.
The Romolo Stone and Brick Barns at 24 Romolo Avenue, Magill, are part of our city's rich heritage and history, particularly to South Australia's wine and champagne making history. Their rich story and character contribute to local, citywide and South Australian history, heritage and culture, and should be protected and preserved for current and future generations. The barns are under threat of demolition as part of a development application for the site, which proposes to demolish one of the barns to make way for a large car park. A recent planning application for the Romolo property was refused by Council's assessment panel for a significant tree matter. Both barns are currently unprotected from demolition. The Romolo barns, one or both of which is proposed to be demolished, is actually to make way for a large impervious car park. The barns are among the earliest and certainly the most historically significant farm buildings remaining in Burnside and indeed metropolitan Adelaide. Romolo House fulfils criteria A, B, D and E under section 23(4) of the Development Act 1993 as a place of local heritage value. The 1987 Burnside Heritage Survey originally recommended that the house, barns and garden of 24 Romolo Avenue be heritage listed. At the time it was allocated the highest heritage value, i.e. an A status, which included that those items should be submitted for state heritage recognition. For unknown reasons, the council at the time only recorded the house on the local heritage register and did not progress an application for state heritage protection. The proposed redevelopment of Romolo House does not respond to its natural surroundings and does not contribute to the character of the locality. The loss of significant trees and other vegetation and a significant increase in building size as well as the large car park will add to urban heat levels, reduce biodiversity and further impact on the once significant environmental performance of the estate gardens. The history of the Romolo estate is significant in regard to three particular people: Patrick Old, Edmund Mazur and the Benithan family. Edward Mazur purchased the land which was originally Home Park in 1846 and began planting the Aldana vineyard. In 1862, Auld founded a London company to import and sell wines from his Aldana vineyard. It was to become the Australian Wine Company and later the Emu Wine Company.
Councillor Hallett, that's your 3 minutes.
I've got about 1 minute to finish.
It's up to the rest of the group to allow. Is that all right if she continues? Up to 1 more minute? All right, 1 more minute is acceptable, seems to be acceptable.
Thank you, members. I just want to let you know about Edmund Mazur. He was a French-trained winemaker and he had a major influence on colonial South Australian winemaking and champagne making and sparkling Burgundy. Mazur was among the first winemakers in South Australia to make champagne on a large scale. His first wines were made in one of the old barns, and in 1919 he had built a winery at the Penfold Road end of the property. Interestingly, he retired to Victor Harbour in 1920s and set up a roller skating ring, a dance hall and a coffee shop in a casino on the foreshore. The Benithan family eventually bought the house. One of their ancestors, Charles McCubbin, one of their ancestors bought the property and then gave it to his son-in-law and Budgie Benithan, who lived in it for 64 years, but it was in the Benithan family for 90 years.
I'm just going to suggest you've run out of time. We've already had
So
an
I'm
extra
asking you
minute.
to protect these barns.
Yeah, so that's the focus of this motion, as you can see in front of you. So I seek a seconder. Councillor Jennings, do you wish to speak now?
No,
Hold. Okay. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Councillor Davey?
I have some questions before I speak. Thanks. The amount of $20,000 has been mentioned for a heritage assessment. In my mind, there has already been a heritage assessment done in the past, and I just wondered if the administration has records of that and why that didn't proceed. Councillor Hallett mentioned that the house had been listed, but not the barns. So I just wondered, do we have a bit more information about why that happened, please?
Through Madam Mayor, unfortunately we don't have that information. It's clear that there was a heritage assessment, local heritage, and the house was approved as local heritage. There is no audit trail around the barn or the gardens at the time. We can only assume that for whatever reason they weren't considered as heritage value at that time, but it could also have been an admin oversight. We just don't know.
Did you have a subsequent question? Actually, if you didn't have it ready, I've got a great list of people, so I'll have to come back to you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Turnbull, you're next.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Look, we've just heard a sensible reminder from Councillor Hubel that we need to be selective on the projects we put forward in our budget bid and others such as this. So I think we really need to think seriously about 20,000 for a project like this, and I won't be supporting it. Sorry.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you. I have a question too. If this were to go ahead and council spends $20,000, is there a guarantee that it will be heritage listed?
Through Madam Mayor, look, there are no guarantees. It's probably the best chance of getting it heritage listed if we were to invest in an advisor this way. But yeah, absolutely no guarantees.
Thank you.
Councillor Dawes.
Yes, Councillor Turnbull took the words out of my mouth. I was looking at Councillor Hubel while this was being mentioned after his discussion about us being fiscally responsible. Just going back to CAP, because I was there, I did ask the question of the planner for the owner, and I think that the acting CEO was there, and I said, oh, you're knocking down one of the barns. They're keeping one, by the way. You're knocking down one of the barns. Is it dilapidated? It was a leading question from me, I must admit. He said, oh, no, it's in perfectly good order. Oh, so why are you knocking it down? It's a difficult one, and I'm kind of between a rock and a hard place because I'm a heritage person, but also I'm a budget person as well. So I'll just let the debate run, and then I'll decide which way I will vote.
Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Worship. I've got two questions. First, through your Worship, and this might be something that Councillor Hallett needs to address, but Mr Heinrich perhaps might have some light on it. So my question is, why now? Is the recent CAP application that failed, has that brought the vulnerable status of these barns to light? Is that the reason? I'm just wondering why the urgency on this.
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, we've been aware of a potential development application for that property for some time, and it was clear fairly early on in the process that one of the barns was at risk. So there's been a lot of interest about this property, and so it has been on the radar screens of many while this application has been going through. In December, the application was heard by CAP, so yeah, that did bring it to a head. There were some tree removals that were of particular concern at the time, and the development application wasn't successful. Through that discussion, as Councillor Dawes mentioned, the second barn was actually discussed, and at one point it seemed to be like it was going to be a negotiation tool to be saved to get the application through, but it didn't get through. I guess people are aware that those barns could be demolished at any time. There's no protection over them. Permission isn't required. So there is an urgency there to protect them for that value. So I think it's been there for a while, but it's probably just been heightened by the fact that a recent development approval where we negotiated the retention of one of the barns, not two, was heard and failed, so it's likely to be coming back soon.
I now actually have a third, so I might rejoin the queue and ask them together.
Councillor Henschke.
I've got a question and for the administration through the Mayor. The consultants McDougall and Vines, were they consulted for the report on Romola House? Because McDougall and Vines were engaged by the City of Burnside, and I've got the whole list here in front of me of all their reports they've done on local heritage and heritage protection in the City of Burnside. So the question is, I know that we can't find it in our database, but can we contact McDougall and Vines to see if this report, they've already got this work in their archives sitting there? Thank you.
Through Madam Mayor, do you mean any sort of work around the heritage value of those?
So they did a lot of detailed work, McDougall and Vines, on all identifying all heritage in the City of Burnside, and they probably have this report in their archives. And the question is, can the administration contact McDougall and Vines?
Sorry, yes. There's no reason why we couldn't do that.
And so we don't need to spend $20,000. There may be sufficient information there for the administration to do in-house implication to state heritage.
Yeah, we can certainly look into that and let everybody know the outcome of that inquiry, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Harvey?
I have a question, please. Could this and should this have been included in the 24-25 budget?
Thank you for the question. Through Madam Mayor, we did put up a budget bid to look at a heritage audit across the city. It's been just under a quarter of a century since we did the last one, and it's probably around the mark where we do need to start considering that. If you think about the post-war architecture that needs to be picked up and protected now, perhaps going forward, but it is very expensive. I think we were talking about $100,000 at the time, so it's a major investment, and it didn't receive the support of council last year for this year's budget.
Councillor Zink.
Thanks, Mayor. I was just comparing this to the financial impact chart that was in the CEO's report early on. This $20,000 would equate to 0.02. Will that be correct, CEO?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Worship. Still two questions. This is directly to the CEO, through your Worship. If this were to fail, this motion this evening, is this something that administration would put forward as an administration bid in the next budget? Not a citywide audit as such, but the allocation of $20,000 for an advisor to take an assessment? Is that something that we would go ahead?
Through Madam...
Yeah, sorry, I stumbled a bit there, but I think you asked my question.
No, I know what you mean. Through Madam Mayor, we obviously work with all council members as part of that, and there's no reason why Councillor Hallett might not put forward a budget bid specific for this one. I don't think we would do that off our own back, so it would be sponsored by a council member. Yeah.
Thank you. And I guess a follow-up, which is slightly related, but does and I'm just reading the detail of the proposed motion, which is essentially my reading of it this evening, is that we are engaging an advisor to undertake an assessment, and if that assessment turns out the way we are pretty sure it will turn out, we would then make pursue a code amendment or a state heritage nomination. If the code amendment or a state heritage nomination were undertaken, are there mechanisms in place that would put a halt on prospective development applications on the property in the meantime? So I guess what I'm asking is, if we are in the process of looking into this, is that something that then the CAP can say, yeah, hold your horses, we're waiting on this process? Can you just give me some commentary about that issue,
certainly.
Please?
Through Madam Mayor, it's a very good question. I might have to just refer it to Mr. Heinrich. Thank you.
Thank you. Through Madam Mayor, the short answer to the question is no. The short answer to the...
Sorry, I've given you prepared.
The short answer to the question is no. The current application has been refused, and time will tell in relation to whether an appeal will be made. So we don't know what the owner is going to do. He's broadly got three options. One is to pursue an appeal. One is to come back with a different application, presumably to keep the tree, which was the sticking point in this case. And the third option is just to walk away, sell the land, or just do nothing for the time being. But in relation to that second option, where a subsequent application can be made, we have to accept it, and we can't put it on hold pending this process.
Oh, my screen's gone blank. I'm sure there was someone there before. Now, Councillor Zinn.
Thanks, Mayor. I was going to say, would it be too much of a variation if I suggested to Councillor Hallett that the council, instead of endorses, considers $20,000 to be funded by the next budget cycle, so 25-26? That way we know what the other budget bids are, and we can compare to see which one takes priority. So this changes to consider over endorses.
Through Madam Mayor, yes, you could, but I think there will be concern in terms of the timing. These processes take time, and if council is serious about taking action, proactive action, to prevent the demolishing of these things, we'd have to do it sooner rather than later.
Councillor Hallett, can you just turn your mic off? Do you have to ask a question to ask?
Oh, well,
that's all you can do, is ask a question.
okay, all right.
Now, Councillor Cornish.
I'm a little torn here. $20,000 if it gets local heritage listing, cheap. To me, it's cheap. For these, they're very good looking buildings, but it's cheap if they become local heritage listed for $20,000 forevermore for the next 100 years. 20 grand's cheap. But on the other side, I'm worried that it's too late. We know it's not going to stop the process midway through. I don't know how long it's going to take. I do not think it's going to get state heritage listing when the house actually isn't state heritage listing anyway. It's only local heritage listing. And also looking at that listing on the Heritage Places database, the state government database, The Romolo houses, it displays historic, economic or social themes that are of importance to the local area, which I'd say the barns would be as well. It represents customs or way of life that are characteristic of the local area. Yes, the vineyards up there are very important to the city of Burnside and its character and its heritage. It's in our logo. It displays aesthetic merit, design characteristics or construction techniques of a significance to the local area. I've got to say it does, looking at these photos. It's associated with notable local personality or events, which clearly, from what Councillor Hallett has provided, it meets that criteria as well. I would absolutely do this like that if we didn't have this axe hanging over, and I don't know how long. We just might be wasting our money because we're too late with this at the moment. And that's my biggest concern. Perhaps if we'd done this like a year ago or whatever, I'd feel a lot more certain of it. I still probably will support it, because I do think $20,000 to support these. Councillor Henschke said in my ear that this would make great for reuse for maybe some strata properties. You could just put some one-bedroom places in these barns and convert them beautifully. Hey, I'd live there. Look, I think it's important that we do try and protect our heritage. This is a significant component of that. With the vineyards that we had in the city of Burnside at the time, there's a lot of history on this property. Innovative techniques were used to try and bring champagne and red bubbles here. Look, I think it's an important component of the city of Burnside that we should try and protect. So I actually will support it, but I'm still very fearful that we're too late.
Councillor Henschke?
I propose, if the mover and seconder are comfortable, considering everything we've heard from Councillor Cornish about timing, considering whether there is a whole lot of work already has been done in the archives of McDougall and Vines, etc., that the motion reads that Council endorses up to $20,000 to be funded at the next quarterly budget review. And that way, it may, and I seek advice from the administration, whether that wording would help them manage a project with minimal cost, that they will design a project and develop a project up to that amount. Doesn't mean that we're saying we're going to spend $20,000. We may well find we just spend $1,000. There might be a few phone calls. It may be in-house. We don't know until the project starts. And if a project doesn't start, there's a risk. And if a project starts, there's a risk of spending money. But we're not giving the administration a blank cheque here. That's how I feel. And I wonder if the administration and the mover and seconder find that helpful.
Through Madam Mayor, thank you for the question. Ultimately, we won't spend it if it's not required. This really is, I read it the same way, it's up to 20,000. You're giving us permission to spend up to that amount to get the job done. We're not going to spend it for the sake of it. So I'm not sure the wording change will make much difference.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So with Burnside's history, once it's gone, it's gone. And with my work with the Adelaide Parklands Association, it's simply a death by 1,000 cuts. We'll just take a little bit here, we'll take a little bit over there, and another little bit here, and another little bit over there, and eventually it's all gone. So I feel we should be making a stand on Burnside's history and try our hardest to protect it. Thank you very much.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you. I have a question. I'm a bit confused about, because I wasn't able to go to the CAP meeting, what is actually if someone can clarify for me, please, what the house is being used for. Is that being developed as a family home? Is this a business, or is it a developer that's working on this? Because I've just heard that we should be able to use the barns to renovate them and make them up as homes, which sounds like a lovely idea. But is that feasible, or are we just touting at windmills? What's realistic?
Through Madam Mayor, we're talking about private property here. So the whole of that property, the house, the barns, the trees, all privately owned. The development application was for it to become a family home, which had obviously been approved from a heritage perspective, so everything was fine there. We had an issue with a tree that they wanted removed, which was ultimately why the development application was refused. In terms of future use, that's entirely up to the current owner. We can't say that it's going to become a single level strata or anything. That's entirely up to them. They could do that, but obviously, whilst those barns aren't protected, there's a free-for-all. Basically, they could do anything. With the protection, that will guarantee their future in whatever guise that takes. Yep.
Councillor Harvey, you have another question, or do you just speak?
Thank you, I'll speak. Councillor Hubel has just mentioned we cannot afford to spend. He's correct. And I believe also that this has been left too late. It should have been actioned last year when there was more time. We're asking our residents to pay $20,000 for something that may not work. It may not be approved. I am all for heritage. I am all for protecting heritage, but I feel this should have been done a long time ago. It is too late, and I agree with Councillor Cornish. We cannot expect our residents to be footing a bill of $20,000 where nothing is guaranteed. So I will not be supporting this. Thank you.
Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just briefly speak to this. Look, again, I am quite torn, as with any decision. My gut is telling me this is not the best decision to make. It doesn't mean that it's not a really good decision, but I'm not 100% behind this. It's not the right way of doing business. I think we need to be more considered. I think when we start becoming reactionary, that's when things can get out of hand, spiral out of control a little bit. Not saying that this would happen, but I'm just talking about what's informing my decision to not support this. It's certainly not that I don't have massive sympathy for this. I just think from a governance approach perspective, this just is not the right way of doing this, which I'm very regretful about. But if this is a sprint against the spectre of a potential demolition, perhaps some strategy could be reaching out to the Burnside Historical Society, get some grassroots support. Perhaps sway some public opinion, which could become relevant to the CAP, should they or should not they not hypothetically be considering anything in the future. And perhaps a media release, a good news story if at the next budget cycle there is a bid and it gets through, perhaps, or even if this motion does get up this evening and we do go ahead with this media release talking about how we are going after protection, certainly would create some public sympathy for what it is we're trying to do. So I apologise to the mover and those of you in the room that are in support of this, but I am not standing with you on this one tonight.
I'd just add that to the comment about Burnside Historical Society, just to say that there was a great deal of presence at the last CAP meeting from members of the society who are very, very, and I've been to two of their meetings where they were rallying the troops to try to support to stop the demolition of the barns. There is nothing, though, that the Historical Society can do apart from speak at CAP as representatives of the community. Councillor Dawes.
Yes, I have a question, just so everybody understands this. The original application from the owner was to remove both barns. And administration worked with that owner and he came up with one barn that he would keep. However, my question is, if he comes back with a new application, does he have to keep one barn in that application?
Through Madam Mayor, no, he doesn't. It can be a completely different application where there's no restriction on what he should or can do. So it's all up in the air.
Councillor Henschke, you...
Oh, yes, speak to the motion
Yep.
now. Everything's moving in very quickly. The developer, who knows what they'll come back to the CAP with. The future's uncertain, but what is certain is, as Councillor Jennings said, is we have incredible heritage in our city, and if it bit by bit gets demolished, there's nothing left for future generations. It's really bad timing that, you know, we think we have to spend $20,000, but we think we have to spend 20, and as you heard from the administration, it's not that they're going to spend $20,000. It's a budget, which, you know, it will be value for money work, which may be $5,000. You know, we can monitor the project. We can say, we'd like to hear in the CEO report how the project's going, how much money's been spent on this project. We still have control of it. And that's really important. And it's really important that we signal to developers that the City of Burnside has values to protect heritage. That's what this will do. And we have strategies and policies about protecting heritage, same with the state government. Unfortunately, for some reason, there's a loophole that these barns weren't included. We just have to do what we can now. And I will support this, and if it means that we don't bitumise 10 metres of some road in some suburb, I'd rather not do that than let these barns be demolished. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey, you've got another question?
I have a question, please. Prior to the new councillors joining council 2 years ago, had this been raised for up to $20,000 to be spent to save these barns and get them heritage listed?
Through Madam Mayor, no, not to my knowledge.
But can I just ask a question? That I think that may also be because we didn't know what the owners of the property were going to do.
No, we didn't.
As a, you know, having been on the previous council, there's nothing ever come to us before about their intent. Their intent was very much about, we were making sure that they were protecting the trees on their property, significant trees, but there's not, because until they come to actually make a request as to what they want to do, there's nothing much we can do.
That's correct, yes.
And I do remember there was conversation about the house itself, being whether it was local or state, but I don't remember. I mean, we didn't do anything about it at that point in time. Councillor Cornish may remind me if we did, but I think we just made sure it was on the register, and at that stage it was on the local. Yeah. Is there anyone now else who wishes to speak or ask a question? I think everyone has either spoken. Right, I shall go back to the mover.
Thank you. Just want to respond to some of the points that were made during the discussion. The matter is urgent. We've had since 1987. That was when the barns, the gardens and the house were heritage assessed and were recommended for local heritage listing and state heritage listing. We don't know why nothing ever happened about that, but nothing ever happened about it. Where that leaves us now is that the barns can be knocked over at any time. It is urgent. The barns are unprotected. Both barns are unprotected. It may be that one goes and then a bit further down the track they then apply to get the second one demolished as well. The only thing we can do, this is the right way to actually get the barns protected. There's no other avenue available to us. Yes, it should have been done sooner, but we're trying to we're attempting to do that now. And this is the right way. It's the only way we can actually protect those barns. And it's not guaranteed, but if they are to be protected, this would be the way to do it. The Burnside Historical Society do support and have been communicated and consulted with, as have a range of heritage experts who all support and turned up for the CAP presentation. I'd like to point out that at the time, Councillor Harvey Jones and myself received an ovation for our attempts to try and save the barns. The barns are actually next to the linear park that connects to Penfold Park. They have a high standing and high value to the local community and to heritage experts throughout our city and other places. Susan Marsden has actually said that they may well be the only example of an agricultural barn left in urban Adelaide. $20,000, when you consider our budget, is a small amount to pay for the protection of something that is a really significant historical and cultural icon in the local McGill community. We spend millions of dollars on sporting facilities. This is $20,000, not $7 million, $20,000 to try and protect our heritage that goes right back to 3 years after settlement. This is the only opportunity, otherwise it's Fernley Lodge over again. So I urge you, it might be late, but late's better than never, and otherwise you're probably likely to see both barns go in the future. This is their only chance.
Thank you. Now I shall put a vote. All those in favour? Those against? Right, the motion is carried. 6 to 4, if I've counted correctly. Now, I'm going to suggest we take a 10-minute break now, because we have confidential items after this, and it makes sense that we have the break now and anyone who needs to go can go, and then we restart with the confidential. We've got one confidential item which has to be agreed by you, and then we have the ones that are in our agenda. Okay?
Was there a second?
Yes.
Can we call a division?
No, it's too late now. Too late now. All right. So you're happy for us to have a 10-minute break now? All right, 10-minute break now.
Second, Mayor. I'll second Councillor Davey.
All right, all support the 10-minute break. Thank you. And we restart at 3 minutes past 9. Thank you. Right, we're starting the meeting again. I have had a request, subject to the leave of the meeting, for Councillor Harvey to make a personal statement related to her health and safety. It's under confidential time, so we do need to move. First of all, you need to agree that she has that opportunity to speak. Looks like yes. So we do need to now move a motion of moving into confidence. Councillor Cornish, you're
Happy
moving.
to move for
yes,
personal-
seconded by
okay.
Councillor Hubel.